Well, that was the second time I had to run our intro blurb because I forgot to press the go live button. Whoops. Welcome, everybody, to our October Akka.net Community Standup. My name is Aaron Standard, and I'm joined here today by Gregorius Sodharmo. Gregorius, how are you doing?
Hello. Good morning. Pretty good. Thank you.
Good. Well, Gregorius is actually working on Akka.net stuff. I, on the other hand, am in the middle of navigating the mysteries of HTTPS and reverse proxies. Good times. So why don't we start off with a little bit of light reading on some of our recent Akka.net releases? And Gregorius, I think we're just going to
Mhm.
dive into the saga of all the different little updates for we'll go through the packages we updated for Akka.net 1.53 first. Then we'll talk about why 1.530 was necessary in the first place. All right.
Mhm.
So yeah,
S-
go ahead.
yeah. So we updated Akka.Persistence sequels. The only big change in this version is the addition of big int, which is recommended by the developers, but not quite supported by LinkedIn. So we added that. We saw a slight increase in performance when using it. If you click on the uh,
Yeah.
on the PR itself, we did see a slight increase in performance, but the only way we can actually detect that now is by checking your provider name. Basically, if you use provider name PostgreSQL 1.5, which is greater than 10, then we actually use the big int instead of serial for the primary key for the journal table.
Yep. So that should be helpful for people who are using Postgres in newer versions. And yes, like Gregorius said, we detect the version of Postgres you're running based on the provider name you pass in your configuration. So you are in the driver's seat. Read the docs. Always a good idea. All right. Next, we've been doing a bunch of work on Akka.Persistence.Redis. It's been getting a little bit of love. Mostly, this kind of ties into the whole theme of 1.530. So maybe we should start teasing that a bit. Go ahead, Gregorius.
Yeah, so one of the big thing we did, one of the change we did in Akka Persistence is to introduce keying off the timestamp. That is needed because sometimes for some users who doesn't use journaling, like they don't really save any events. They just use the snapshot to basically snapshot the state of their actors. Since the sequence number is basically zero, there's no way for uh, Akka Persistent to know which snapshot to delete. So uh, we this is actually a 10 years bug, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is. It's a decade old bug.
Yeah, so we actually introduced the timestamp into the query itself. So now Akka Persistent know which snapshot to delete. Uh, the problem is that in 1.5.29, there was a bug where we passed in the a normal date time into the snapshot metadata, and that causes havoc with protobuf serializers.
Yeah, the protobuf serializer will barf. And this is not us. This is the low level proto library from Google. Will
Mhm,
barf if it's not a UTC date time being passed in.
mhm.
So we just had to make some API call adjustments, and we'll get into some of the our first failed attempt at doing that and our second successful one. We'll touch on that when we get to Akka.net 1.529 and so forth. But that's something that we've been working on. Um, let's see. I'll circle back on my AkkaStreamsCookbook. I'll get to that in a minute. We also upgraded AkkaStreamsKafka to 1.530. Gregorius is in the middle of investigating a definitive bug with this library right now, which is basically caused by a behavior change we made to Akka Streams in 1.529. We're still investigating it. No updates yet. All right. Now for the big kahuna, let's talk a bit about what went wrong with 1.529 and how we fixed it in 1.530.
Mhm.
I guess
Well,
you kick that off too.
yeah. So our first iteration is to actually change how iScheduler work by introducing a new property to the interface itself. But turns out that iScheduler is being used everywhere, and it broke everything. So we have to revert that basically. That's why we are deprecating 1.5.29. If you want to upgrade, go straight to 1.5.30.
Yeah, we put out a deprecation notice for 1.529 on NuGet as soon as 1.530 shipped. Long story short, we thought we should have an explicit UTC property on that timer interface, and I guess we had forgotten one of the rules of binary compatibility in .NET, which is that if a member from an interface is missing, that is not binary compatible. So whoops, our bad. Well, on a public interface anyway. So our bad on that front. That was one of those things where that type of extension on a class is usually okay as long as you're not trying to access the property. But on interfaces, it's a problem because of the classes that implement them. That's why. So we forgot that. Even though we have, we basically detected that in our breaking our API change detection system, but we just thought it was an extension, which is normally pretty safe. In this case, it definitely was not. So we reverted that and we just fixed the problem by changing the way we use the date time offset that the date time offset provider returns. There's another property on there called UTC date time that did that fixed it just fine. So that's what we took care of. Default interface implementations in the future should make this type of extension safe potentially, but unfortunately, that is not a thing that exists in the versions of .NET that we are currently targeting. So, yeah, good stuff. So, anyway, that's 1.530. That's out. Let me talk a little bit about this AkkaStreamsCookbook project that I've been working on. So, this is something, and I'll drop a link to this in chat while I'm at it. All right, StreamYard. Let's go ahead and disseminate that out. There we go. So yeah, here's the URL for this. If you want to check it out, it's in my personal sort of GitHub organization. This is a repo that I've been working on this year, mostly to make some YouTube videos on how to do various things with Akka Streams. And for some reason, I've used Spectre Console in both of the applications I built so far. That's just because I like it for building console apps. Um, and also, this was a good opportunity to learn it. So we added a new project here, this durable subscriptions model. This was in response to a question we had from one of our consulting clients who they're doing a ton of CQRS with Akka.Persistence. They wanted the ability to basically have a perpetual means of synchronizing other event providers inside their system. So if you can imagine, you've got all this source of truth activity happening inside Akka.Persistence. You want to have a way of synchronizing that with another system. The other system could be something like Kafka, for instance. So I basically built a little proof of concept in this repo here that uses Postgres and Akka.Persistence.Sql and has basically a server and a client for being able to maintain subscriptions. So let me go and fire up this server real quick. So this uses basically Akka.cluster to go ahead and run the server. It uses cluster sharding, cluster singletons, all that good stuff. We're using Bogus to synthesize some data for a whole bunch of different products inside here. So you see copper, oil, platinum, silver, all that good stuff. And then we use Spectre.console to go ahead and run a client where each one, and here's the key idea behind this. Each one of these subscribers has a unique subscriber ID. Therefore, they are reentrant. I can have a subscriber pick up where I left off. Essentially, this is kind of like if you're working with Kafka, you have consumer groups and they might have their partitions, their partition offsets get saved automatically by Kafka. This is basically that, but using Akka.Persistence to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun this command on my little command line down here. Oh, look, I had actually shut the server down for a while and the client was chugging away here the whole time. And when the server came back online, the client reconnected. This is using the Akka.cluster client, by the way, to do this behind the scenes. Now, if I go and create another client, let me do this real quick. Petabridge. It's I think AkkaStreamsCookbook. There we go. Go into here. We'll go into our durable subscriptions, and I'll change this to silver, copper, 1, and we'll change this to product oil, product gold, product silver, product copper. Hit run. This is going to catch up on all the events that it missed. So now it's up to, let's say, sequence number 450. This node is at 451. So it's basically caught up. And we receive these events in pages from Postgres. That way we're not, wasting time on like little small individual items. We're getting pages of data, and those, once that page gets acknowledged, all the sequence numbers move forward. So it kind of helps make things a little bit more batch oriented that way. And that's what this thing's doing behind the scenes. I could clean up the console output by basically turning off console logging for the client. That would make it so the only game in town here is what's being written out by Spectre console. But that's something that I've been working on, and you can check that out at the AkkaStreamsCookbook repository. I also have my original Spectre console sample here, the stream references one, which demonstrates how to work with Akka streams over the network. That one's using stream references, which are very powerful. The durable subscription system is not really using stream refs. It's doing everything with actor messaging over Akka.Cluster client, but it does use streams real heavily for working with the actual data coming out of Akka.Persistence. Okay, next, let's go ahead and talk a bit about some of our future plans for Akka.net. So you should be receiving an email about this relatively soon if you're on our mailing list. If not, we'll also post a notice in Discord. We also did link to this in our newsletter that went out on Monday. We are doing a webinar at the end of October on how to test Akka.net applications. One of the most hotly demanded things we've had for the Petabridge YouTube channel is more content on testing. So we're going to make good on that and do a webinar that goes into some depth on it. So if I pull up the registration page here, I'll take a look at the table of contents real quick. So we're going to go ahead and cover the basics of using the test kit. So we're talking a bit about using test probes and the test actor and that sort of thing. We're going to talk a bit about testing persistent actors, specifically using the in-memory journal and snapshot stores, which is like what we're using in one of our applications we're building right now. We'll also talk a bit about using the Akka.Persistence test kit to help simulate persistence failures and how your system copes with that. We'll talk a bit about Akka.dependency injection to work with DI for actors and how to do that in a testing context. And then finally, we'll tie the DI bits in with the Akka hosting test kit, which is basically what we want to use for integration testing. So we use a combination of all this stuff inside our projects. We also even use a couple of other testing components occasionally, like the Akka Streams test kit, all the multi-node test runner. We use those as well, but we're not going to cover all of those as part of this webinar. Anyway, it's free to sign up. And if you can't attend live, we'll send you the recording that same day. And eventually this stuff will probably make it up onto the YouTube channel. It almost always does. So we will go ahead and do this on October 30th. Please go ahead and register for that. Let's see. Now, Gregorius, you've been working on some Akka.Persistence.Sql optimizations recently as well. I know
Yes.
one of the ones that you've got, and I still need to review this, is you ported, this is from my blog post maybe a couple of years ago on how we solved some contention problems with the Akka.Persistence.Sql.common plugins. So this is like Akka.Persistence.Sql server and Postgres and all that stuff. We have brought that over to, let me go over to, let's see. Go over to Akka.Persistence.Sql here. You've just recently ported this design over, yeah, here we go, over to Akka.Persistence.Sql. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that's doing?
Yeah. Basically, this implements the throttling mechanism that has been available in Akka.Persistence.Sql common to Akka.Persistence.Sql. It limits the the maximum number of queries that can run against a database, basically.
Yeah, and this is to protect against things like saturating the connection pool and all that good stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we've got that in place. That's one thing you're working on. And you also tried that suggestion from another one of our customers, the sequential
Mhm.
key stuff for SQL Server.
Yeah, I did. The result is not really encouraging. The performance gain is basically just statistical noise. So we think it's not really a good idea to change how the database is being initialized just because of a hunch.
Yep, I'm with you there. And we always we take suggestions from end users on how to improve performance and do other things seriously, and we've been measuring these. So we accepted one change, the big int change, but this
Mhm.
one for SQL Server, we decided the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze here for trying to introduce this. Um, Couple of other things that we're working on beyond just what's on the agenda here. Per our meeting last month, I'm still doing some work on trying to replace the Akka.Remote transport. I've been kind of tinkering with that, looking at some of Kestrel's designs and trying to see how we can incorporate some of that into Akka.Remote. It's one thing I've been working on. I've also been playing around with, I didn't even tell you this yet, Gregorius. I've been playing around with the source generated JSON serialization from the most recent versions of .NET
Oh,
Core,
cool.
actually. We're
So
using that
that's
in. Go ahead.
system.text.json, right?
That's system.text.json. And yes, basically, what this allows us to do is not use any reflection to deserialize objects. So, ironically enough, in order to use that, in order to use the sort of compile time system.text.json, you basically need a system that's more or less identical in spirit to what our manifest and serializer ID system does. You have to provide some
Mhm.
type of like standard way of signaling. This is the data type that needs to get processed. Now in ASP.NET, it's relatively easy to do that because you have your MVC controller or your action method or whatever it is, and that takes a strongly typed model that you define as a C# class, right? So
Mhm.
the way you specify your serialization type in that system is based off the HTTP route. You basically know that this request or this response always has to be mapped to this type of object. So the object mapping is kind of done implicitly through the design of your HTTP contracts that way. Over something that's more socket oriented, like Akka.Remote, you basically need to use a scheme similar to our serializer manifest system to basically virtualize that same idea. So it's pretty interesting. I haven't had a chance to benchmark it yet. There's a project that we will hopefully have announced by our net. Well, not only announced, but actually announced and made public by our next community stand up, where we are using this. So I'm going to go ahead and tease that a little bit. We've got something that we've been, Gregorius and I have been working on. I'm in the process of dealing with all sorts of fun web dev stuff on that project right now. And it's all built on top of Akka.net, so it should be pretty cool. We should hopefully have that announced by our next community stand up. So if we don't, it'll definitely be out in time for December's. All right. Well, that's all that I've got for this week. Gregorius, is there anything else that we need to cover?
No, I think that covers everything.
All right. So we've kept it nice and short for you. Hey, listen, if you are doing anything interesting with Akka.net and would like a chance to tell your story, go ahead and reach out to me or Gregorius on Discord. We're always looking for people to help do show and tell presentations. They're always really interesting. We haven't really been pursuing those all that aggressively this year. But please, if you have a story you'd like to be able to tell about Akka.net, it's a great opportunity for you to attract some talent to your company. And it's a great way to kind of show your it's a great way to go ahead and kind of help show your support for the community too by just sharing your story about how you built something important on top of Akka.net. So please let us know if you would be interested in speaking further on that. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time this week, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we will catch you next month when we do our November community stand up. Thank you and I'll see you all in Discord. All right. Take care.